Okay. Good evening, maybe. Hello. Are the mics not on?
I heard it.
No? You did?
Yeah.
Huh. Usually we hear it way
This one
louder
is
up
on.
here.
Turn it up.
That's fine. If you can hear it, I don't need to hear myself.
There we go.
Testing, testing. Okay, welcome. It is Wednesday, March 20th, 2019. We're at the Freeport High School Library. Erica will not be with us this evening. She's traveling, and I think we heard Rhea will not as well. She was having some car issues. So we will get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, adjustments to the agenda.
We have one under new business. We want to talk about the membership on the Strategic Planning Committee.
Okay. So we'll do that after the budget.
Yes.
Good news and recognition, since Rhea is not here, unless anyone has any good news or recognition in the place of the student rep. All right. So we'll move on to public comment. If you had anything you wanted to share, we have two public comment periods on our agenda. One is here at the start. If you'd like to speak, we just ask you come up to the mic, tell us your name, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Nobody's racing up there. Give him a thick. Not even Kevin, that's what I just heard up here. He's waiting till the end. Okay, so then we will move on to the report from the superintendent.
Okay, so before we kind of resume deliberations on the budget, I wanted to answer some of the questions from last week and just then do a brief update. And so I'm going to start off with the request that I had around the tennis courts, and I'm asking Craig Sickles to come up to kind of respond to what our best thinking is about addressing the current state of the tennis courts.
Good evening. So Dennis Willett, Becky Foley, myself, and Michelle Lichtai met earlier this week, and this is This is the recommendation that came out of that meeting. That I'm going to get a couple more quotes on both asphalt and post-tension. We have one each, and so we want to make sure that what we have as quotes and the general idea of what it might cost moving forward. I'll come back early in the fall, present to you the pros and cons that I've researched. There's actually a lot out there. If you just Google it, you can find it, but I will come back and present that. Dennis is going to work with the facility committee in the fall to determine when we might when we will resurface it again. I'll join the group when the facilities committee tours, and that resurfacing could be budgeted as early as fiscal year 21. Once the resurfacing year is determined, we would then go 5 years out to determine what the budgeted what we would budget for the replacement of the current courts. A tennis court reserve account would be created, and based on the amount of what the courts will cost and the 7 years out, we'll just do the math, and it will be probably approximately $35,000 a year, so that 7 years out, when it's time to replace, we'll have that money for full replacement. The tennis boosters are just this last year for the first time organized. I'll reach out to them, and hopefully we'll harness some of their energy as well.
Thank you. Go ahead, Val. and then we'll go to you.
Thank you so much for putting this together on such short notice. I'm actually presently impressed and surprised that it actually came to be. So I have a couple of questions. The resurfacing itself, what was the lifespan for that?
Well, The actual lifespan and what the company said the lifspan was?
No, the actual. It was something like
That's
five.
two different things. So we resurfaced it last in 2015
Okay.
at a cost of $23,000.
Okay.
And when I first came and presented, we can't afford $23,000 every 5-6 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I made mention that it's probably time to replace.
Right.
And so with the gigantic cost of 250 now, you know, I think resurfacing it one more time, getting 5-6 years out of it, and then being able to budget responsibly and incrementally, you know, I think that's the least impactful budget way to go.
So if boosters and other parent groups were able to fundraise to help out with the resurfacing cost, the 23,000, would that be the way to move this up in the schedule and not have to wait for a couple years? Because it says fiscal year 21 budget would be next year, so they wouldn't be resurfaced until another season. So it'd be 2 seasons on the same courts, right?
I'm not sure if I can answer that question. That's a big speculation on what
Okay.
and how much they or whoever could, you know, could raise.
Okay. But if people ask about fundraising opportunities, what do we tell them? Because I
Contact-
have had some questions about it and some
Yeah.
offers.
So
from
right
parents.
now, I don't even know who the tennis booster group leadership is. They're that new.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to have to reach out to them and find them. So if anyone's interested, have them to contact me, and then we'll move forward from there.
Okay, thank you.
Kate?
That's me. I'm on the tennis boosters.
There you go.
So, I mean, and honestly, it's a very weird thing because I was on the basketball boosters as well. For some reason, you know, basketball boosters raise a tons of money because it's that type of a sport. It's really hard to raise money for tennis. It really is. You got like 1 or 2 parents out there watching the games and stuff. But it's definitely something that, you know, it's a good group of people. So maybe we can make 1,000. You know, bought a ball machine last year, I think, is what we did.
Right. And, you know, booster groups vary from, you know, it's all sport contingent and how many kids play. The more kids you play, the more parents you have, the more energy you have. You know, sports, golf, tennis, cross-country running really isn't, although actually they do have a pretty good booster group. They actually they have one of the best booster groups as far as money raised. I was thinking concession stand. You know, there's no concession stand. You know, but the other sports that have concession stands, that's kind of the go-to thing, and so it varies from sport to sport.
Kate, did you have a question?
I had a general question just for, I guess it would be for Becky, Craig, and Dennis. When looking at the tennis courts, does this spark anything in your mind that's similar to this that we should be doing some additional planning for, so we're not constantly trying to pick things up as we go and put them into the plan, and doing patch jobs here and there to get us to a point where we can fund it through like a capital reserves? Are there any other items like this that you could think of, or maybe you haven't really done a brainstorming session like this, where we should be looking at establishing capital reserve funds for other items?
So is your question about other facilities?
Yeah, whether it's athletic facilities or building capital improvements that we aren't right now having, you know, carrying in the plan, or we have them so far out that we haven't looked at them as closely as maybe we should be.
And they're never going to last as far out as they are in the plan.
Exactly.
I think I would have Dennis really answer that question. There's nothing that comes to my mind, and if you remember last year, you did increase the amount of our, or just that to we are now at 400,000 for the yearly maintenance. But I think there are always more needs, and you know how much is enough. But I can't think of any other big ones. Other than, is
before
there?
Dennis,
Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, before I give it to Dennis, the one that comes to mind is the middle school outdoor basketball courts. Those would probably be the, as far as my mind, athletically, that would be the next thing to go, because there's some cracks in that as well.
As far as the other buildings, and you have to look at the 20-year plan. It's pretty comprehensive. It's every roof, every piece of siding, every window, try to be pretty thorough. Do I miss things? Maybe. Hopefully not. I really can't think of anything that I missed right now, but I'll go home and, geez.
Well, I mean, that's all I'm asking is, like, if it hasn't been done, if you could do that and just look again at the 20-year plan and see, oh, geez, we have this to be replaced way out here, but there's no way it's gonna make it
I
that
think
far.
that's pretty, not usually, no. I'm pretty good at pulling up the stuff, lifespanning it out, and I also have capital assets management that I take care of the lifespan, and I try to put lifespans on them, and they two kind of marry together. And so no, I mean, I know I have a big roof to do in a couple years, and I worry about that. But typically, no, it's on the 5-year plan because I know it's coming up. I was usually pretty careful about that. I don't know how else to answer that, really.
Well, I think the issue here is that you guys were told that resurfacing would last 15 years.
Right.
So
Yeah,
that's-
they said that. I always thought we'd have to revisit that at some point, but I didn't think it'd be this quick, actually. But this is Maine, and asphalt and, frost heaving and things like that, so it's really tough.
I thought of something, I don't know if it's in this category, but getting solar panels. We're working on that, right?
We're actually going to have a sustainability committee. We're going to probably be discussing that quite a lot, I assume. We haven't
That may
really.
work itself into
Yeah,
a 20-year plan.
right. At some point,
some
we have to
point.
decide if that's the right way to go for us.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why we're doing the sustainability committee, I believe.
Right.
So I look forward to doing that work.
Vali?
So Dennis, on the tennis court, since the lifespan of the job that they performed here was nearly a third of what they said it would be, is there any warranty that we can call
the
upon, or how we
warranty-
contact them and say, hey, can you give us
I
something?
can try. I can actually give them a call and talk to them about it, but
I mean, maybe even they can cover
I
the
believe the warranty's a
resurfacing or
1-year warranty for cracks.
yeah. It just seems unfair that they basically gave us an estimate for something that then was a third of what they said it would
Yeah.
be. I don't know. I mean, even if we say we need to resurface the things, the kids can even play on them
There's
anymore.
always
Can you
the-
do something?
There's always the caveat of, well, we don't know what's underneath the unit and what's going to be pushing up. And, if you start and you build a tennis court and you start from like we did with the track and all those unsuitable soils, if you guys remember that term, and all of that stuff, and they built it right, and we don't know what's under there, and rocks get pushed up and things like that. So, it's hard to warranty something like that. They did warranty it for a year, I believe. But I will check. I will follow up on. That's a great question. I will follow up.
You
on
can
that.
throw us under the bus,
Yeah.
saying we are the ones.
No, I don't mind. I don't mind asking that question.
Thank
Do
you.
it all day long.
Thank you.
Yep.
I guess my one final request would be to just encourage you to look back at the plan, revisit any of the life expectancies to make sure they're still
Sure.
in alignment in what you think based on the condition of things currently. And then if, like, for instance, I don't know how much Craig and you communicate on what items he thinks should be added in, or if just to make sure that that line of communication is
Right.
open, like are the middle school basketball courts
Yep.
in the plan?
Yep. Okay.
Jeremy?
Might be for Craig or Dennis, but as part of the middle school basketball courts, is there any plan for the field itself there? Just its general condition is not always the greatest, but
We've actually started putting irrigation in that field, which is going to make a huge difference, and we're changing our cultural practices. So we're reseeding and with water now. So you should see a big advantage over the next coming years. Once you put water on a field, it makes a total difference.
The seeding works so much better with water.
Yeah, I know you have a summer, you throw a bunch of seed and it never rains. It stops raining. But
'Cause
the
certainly the problem
water
shouldn't be just water
is
in general
everything.
there, yeah.
It really is. Yeah. So I'm hoping, and we've talked about, Jason and I, my field guy, talk about that a lot actually, on how how we think, and we put irrigation on the baseball field too, and that's made a huge comeback. So, we've done a lot of little things. It's got to prove it out now. Yeah.
And I feel like those things are on the plan. Like, I feel like I've seen Durham's irrigation is somewhere on
It
the
is.
plan.
It's on the air. It's just getting there, We have a well that they didn't use for the school, a tank and a well that we can take the water from. It's just getting the system up and running. We've actually talked to the irrigation people about that, but of course we're just trying to, get lined up at this point.
And the $400,000 in this year's budget, that's all accounted for. None of that is
Pretty
earmarked
much.
for the
Yep.
capital reserve, right?
Right.
So at this point, the only thing that goes directly into the capital reserve is whatever we didn't spend.
Well, there might be, I don't know what the reserves number is this year. I know next year it's 6,000. I don't know why I know that. That's next year because we were doing the work on the tennis courts. But I think there's a reserve number in there too, but it's not really a lot. It's 8,000 or something.
It's basically a rounding to get to 400.
Yeah, that's the oh my God, I didn't budget enough for this money. I think, which is not usually what happens, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, the next question was around the field trips, or field work, as we like to refer to it. So I've attempted to try to put together a couple of sheets to talk about this. I'll wait till everybody has their sheet. So one of the questions was, what's in the current budget? Because this came up last time, that we had decided as a team to redistribute the money equitably across the schools. And so you see the current year, the amounts that are in the budget in each of the schools. And then what we did was basically take that same amount and had a discussion and decided as a group that K through 2 really doesn't go on as many field experiences as our 3 through 8 kids. So we did a smaller amount and came up with $5.33. And then for 3 through 8, we took that same amount and came up with $15 a student. And so what you see in the FY20 column is what we have in the budget that we're proposing to you tonight. And then in the last column, you had requested, like, well, what is the hit that you heard Emily talk about, how there's going to be an impact on her school, and you can clearly see that it is. But I think that overall the team agreed that this is a more equitable way to go about it, so that there's one school isn't doing all fundraising for their field work and another school is having it all budgeted. And you also know from your other sheet that was something that the administrative team had wanted to increase for last year, but when we prioritized, it ended up in the 3rd priority. And then on the other question that was asked is on the next sheet, on the kind of tan colored sheet. And Kate, I think this was around your question. You wanted to, I think you really asked a different question, but I kind of went with my best thinking. And these are the trips that really, this is the total cost, and then when you divide it by the number of kids that would be impacted, you see the cost per student. And, for I mean, obviously, I don't think this year we've charged anybody $200 or even $225 because the principals managed to do either go into the PTC or going to like a fundraising event, like their photo money or magazine drive or whatever. They've been able to reduce that. And I did not write that out because you really can't count on that from year to year, and I just thought this would give you the information that you needed in case you wanted to look at increasing that. So I just did the total cost of the trip. There were other trips that the administrators listed, but they all resulted in it being less than $50. It was either $50 or less than $50 a student that was having to be paid. We ended up defining as a group a field trip to mean the trips that take place during the school day and that they're kind of organized and conducted by our employees as a means of kind of enhancing the curriculum. So there are a lot of trips that we take that are really related to extracurricular, like the baseball team I think is getting ready to go down to North Carolina. None of that is, I don't have any of that in here because they usually do fundraising for that. I guess one of the things that I would recommend that if you really want to increase the budget for field experiences, that you increase it by an overall amount that we distribute, by that kind of per student amount, because every year, as we talked about last time, principals really look at, is this accomplishing what we want it to accomplish? So I would hate for the board to go to something like, we're going to fund Kiev, because, Ray may decide next year that he doesn't want to do the Kiev trip, or the staff. So that would be my recommendation. I would also recommend that if, as a board, you're wanting to grapple with what is an excessive amount to ask any family to pay for a particular trip, that go back, that we send that to the policy committee and revise that policy that is IJOA, field trips and other student travel. And I think you could, say that if, no family will be charged, more than $50 for any individual trip, so that if principals couldn't figure out other forms of fundraising and they couldn't get it down to that cost, well, then they'd find an alternative activity. So that's kind of my update on field work.
Jen.
So I'm guessing, Kate, you might be thinking the same thing. So I guess what would be good to know from this cost per student is approximately what is being charged right now for those trips. Like, I know only because my kids went through Durham that we didn't pay that. Like, that was done all through fundraising. I mean, you pay it as a parent, you pay it. But it's just,
You bought the raffle tickets instead of
in a
writing the
different
check to
way.
the school, but
it wasn't like I didn't write a check. And so I guess it would be helpful to know at like Mass Landing, at Pownell, and at Freeport Middle, and I remember, Emily, I think you did mention last meeting, how much each family pays towards Chewonki, but I don't remember. So just to give an idea, obviously everyone's going to fundraise as much as they possibly can, but it's just not, you can't expect it, it's going to change. But, is it equitable among schools that, the kids in Durham, aren't having to write that check, but then kids at Freeport Middle School are? Does that make sense? Just to know kind of what is being paid?
So, I kind of gathered that information and I did not put it into a chart because it becomes very confusing. Mm-hmm. And from year to year that can change.
Right,
and I am trying to get to something that is more equitable, right?
Right.
And so, for example, to use those two examples, you can see that last year Chewonki was paid by primarily, and I'll look to Emily to correct me if I say something wrong, but primarily by the budget. And And so, go ahead, Emily. And she can, she can give the exact amounts. And for example, at Durham for the 4-H, that was entirely fundraised. And so that's why I'm trying to move away from that kind of formula, where you're, or lack of one, right? That's
I don't mean
equitable.
formula. I guess I mean like if I think not to like speak, but Kate's saying like getting to the point where if anyone is paying anything, it's $50. Whether like maybe Durham will then have to start putting $50 towards things, whereas then it would just be like you said, equitable. Like if you add the money to the budget, it gets spread over. I mean, I think being equitable is what everyone like ultimately wants.
Right.
Is that
So-
every
so-
family is you're not lucky because you're in Durham and they fundraise more. Like that shouldn't be the
exactly.
case.
So look at your blue sheet.
Or your school
Right.
just happens to
And
have had
you-
a really good
and-
negotiator at some point in the budget and got.
And I think if we added these up, I think I did earlier today, and then I took it out because I thought, so you can see that's what is in the budget right now. It's 15.5.
Right.
And that if you add up those fundraisers that are right there, that are, I think I did this at one point today, I think it's on the tan sheet. So if you want to, like, as a board, if you're just wanting to fund those trips, you would take the total cost of the ones that are over $50, and that comes to $75,000, and you'd subtract the $15,000, and you'd have the amount that would need to be placed in the budget.
Although, Becky,
Well-
I'm a little confused. Are the 15,500 in the budget? I thought they were in the third category. That
No, this is
hasn't
has already been in the budget. This is the same amount as last year.
Okay, so the third category that we see it's not that number.
Yeah, the third priority one
There's
is that
a number in the
30,000.
third priority. And
Yes.
I don't have it here.
It's
I'm looking for it, and
It's
it looks
32,000.
Okay, that explains it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, that's currently not in there. This is how much is currently in here based upon the budget from this year.
So can we take that to say that $60,333 is funded via fundraising or direct money from parents?
Yes.
Okay. But we don't know the breakdown of how much is fundraised versus how much is a check from parents.
Because it's like different for every trip.
Right.
And that's where it got confusing. Emily, how much were you saying, how much was funded through the budget and how much was funded?
So last year I negotiated with Chewonki.
Yes.
So we were only charged $110 per student. So what I did this year, what was added, that purchase professional, $7,000, made the difference of going from 110 to 200. Chewonki was able to do that knowing our intention was to have a multi-year partnership. So this year, parents were charged 50 of the 200 total. And then keep in mind, anytime, because we want to make sure there's equity with experience, we plan for receiving payment from about 90% of parents. Now it ebbs and flows from year to year, but then PTC funding or other fundraising is often making up for the families who truly have an inability to pay.
Okay. So Emily, before you go. So you were able to negotiate this 110 price based on a 5-year commitment.
No, there was no time frame commitment other than it was multi-year. So Chewonki and our 5th grade team and I started a conversation about a potential partnership. Mass Landing had a partnership many years ago, and it was September, and I said, budget season's passed. I know I'm not going to be able to get, he said, what could you pay this year and feel like you were respectful to Chewonki. So last year they did the experience for what I felt like I could pay, knowing to me that $50 number felt appropriate, and that's where we landed as a team. And PTC and some fundraising helped fill in the other pieces. And the only reason Chewonki was willing to do that is because we were essentially saying, we're committed to building a relationship. There's no contract that's multi-year other than just a verbal commitment that we were invested in that partnership.
So how do you plan to follow through with your verbal commitment if you lose $7,000 in the budget?
It'll be a big point of conversation when we have clarity about what our next steps are. So things that I'm imagining would be on the table would be increasing the parent request, going to PTC, and I think we've probably tapped our PTC. They're paying $5,000 towards fifth grade experiences now. Looking at other fundraising, we've really tried to minimize the impact of any fundraising on students. Students aren't involved in fundraising. We use some of the fundraisers that kind of come through the office to fund it. But my gut right now is we would see a greater impact on our family expectation for a contribution.
Okay. One more question, if I may. Last time you mentioned that this was in your purchase professional line. So you chose to use the $7,000, the purchase professional, in lieu of hiring another consultant or doing something else. So this is how you prioritize that line. So did you give up any other services to be able to fund the field trip?
No, so this is the first year that money has been in the purchase professional line, and it was a result of a specific request for the money for that purpose. So it wasn't money that was allocated or earmarked for something else previously, but as a building, yes, we prioritized that as a request when it was added in last year.
Okay. And this is a question for Becky. Is there any way to gradually phase in this new formula? It seems like it would be a very quick hit. And I don't know if the school can absorb that magnitude of a change so fast without basically telling parents you have to pay another $70 each in addition to the $50 you paid last year.
Well, I mean, assuming you don't have kids in back-to-back years, it's not something you would pay every year, right? You only pay when your kid is in that grade.
I'm just saying from the perspective of the school administration, all of a sudden they are faced with having to raise an additional $7,000 without warning, I would say. I mean, there's a warning now until it comes, but it's not much.
Consider yourself warned.
I think we've been talking about this for a couple of months. I think, is there a way? There's always a way, right? But then it's just, it's not as if this is a long-standing program at Mass Landing that's been happening for, 5 years or 10 years. That's just part of that. So I guess my direct answer is there's always a way to phase it in, but then it just continues to be inequitable for other schools, as you can see from the numbers.
Are you set? I'm all set. You're good? Okay. Kate.
Okay, so this is not the information I asked for, but I think I can get to what I'm trying to get at here with the numbers presented. So right now, when you say on the blue sheet, the following amounts were used per student, that's for FY20?
That's what got to the 15.5? Is that how you got to the 15.5?
No, the 15.5 is what we're currently doing, and well, you can see so currently in Moore Street's budget, you can see that they have 0, right? And so we just took the amount that is in the current year because when we prioritized, we didn't increase any of these. And so we
But that's how you allocated it, was that formula?
Yes, of the 533 and the 15, using the same amount that we have this year of the 15.5.
Right.
So if we took all the kids and put it through this formula, we'd end up with 15.5.
Yes.
So, no, I guess the formula is only being used for the FY20 numbers, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So RSU 5
Yes.
is contributing $15 per student to field work.
Yes.
Yet asking for parents to contribute $50 for some, or even up to $150 for others.
Correct.
And that's what I'm trying to remedy, is to get RSU 5's contribution up to at least what the parents are contributing.
I think that's a fair request.
Or to bring up the RSU 5 contribution, which would then bring down. So it's more equitable as what is RSU 5 is putting in versus what. So like, I see what you're saying.
So rather than
So-
15, say 50, which is what parents are paying. Yes.
And so that's why I just feel like, you know, to me, this is going to always be a moving target, right? And that's why I keep encouraging you to go back to policy to say, if we feel like we don't want parents to contribute more than $50, right, then write that in policy, and then the principals will manage that. Because every year we have, I think the Chewonki trip this is the second year, right? And I think it's something that those of us who are on the strategic planning, I think you're going to see that rise up, that that the community, the students are wanting more experiential learning. So I think we have to come up with something that says we're never on any given trip, we're not going to request a family to pay for more than whatever. And then have the principals work from that, because this isn't like, you know, all of the trips that they take. And, you know, some of the trips are free, but then there are many other trips that they take.
I agree with going the policy route, but I don't see how these two proposals are mutually exclusive. I think we could add more money to the budget and say we contribute 50 per student, and in addition to that, we say we don't want parents to pay more than 50. So I mean, I would support both the proposals.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure we want to say right now there's 15 and we want to go to 50 because, like, you know, we're talking about kids K through 8 in Durham and there's only 2 trips, right? So to assess $50 for each kid, but only 2 grades worth are doing anything, that seems excessive. I mean, I think the way to approach this might be, if we want to feel like it's more fair, to say half of it's funded via the budget and the other half, whether it's fundraising or parental, take the 75, split it in 2, results in a $22,000 increase to what we're currently paying, right? It gets us up to half of the field trip.
Right, and that's all I'm trying to get at, but I can't get at it with these numbers, and that's why I asked for the other information. I don't know what the number is. I'm just saying we should at least be closer than $15 per student.
But remember,
3
this is
through 8.
$15 whether they go on a trip or not, right? So it's not just $15 for the kids in the grades that are going. So, like, for Durham, there's 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, right? There's only 2, so we're funding all of those kids at $15 a kid, but only 2 of them are actually accessing the cash for their field trip.
No, because they're
that's
doing
not-
other field trips.
That's, okay, so this is now this doesn't give you,
But for the over $50 ones, they don't have one.
well, right, and I think that's what is making this, that's why I think you have to come up with like a set amount and then maybe some set rules, like I'm saying. These are the ones that the principal listed that they are that they're taking right now, but this could change tomorrow, right? And so I think that's what makes this more complicated and why I wrestled with it in a few different ways. So you could see these are like, you know, these are some of the trips that that cost something.
So all I wanted to say is that even though the only ones that we have listed here, which are the big ticket items because they're more expensive, are the ones listed, that doesn't mean that if we give $50 to the kids who are not in 6th or 8th, say if they're in 7th grade in DCS, that they won't be able to use it for something, because I'm looking for DCS 7th grade, and I don't know what they have because it's a long list, but I assume that every grade goes somewhere. I don't
Nope, 7th
recall
grade doesn't.
even a day trip. I don't recall a year when
Will,
our
do you wanna
kids
speak?
didn't go anywhere. maybe they won't use the full 50, but that's something that could be in the school account to use for when they do get to this 6th grade or 8th grade and they do need more than 50. So, I mean, 50 is just a number. It could be 40, it could be 60. But what I'm saying is that they don't have to spend 50 every year. I mean, that could be accumulated in the school account for the big trips. So it can be saved up and it can be used judiciously at the discretion of the principals.
Right, so that's why, well, you can't save it up from one year to another, but I think what you're saying, Valley, is that, you know you have $50 per student, and this is going to go to the 6th grade trip, and even though there's not a big one in 7th grade, they'll reap the benefit of that cost per student when they get to 8th grade. Yeah, that's what. Go ahead. Will, what did you want to say about 7th grade?
I don't think that works.
I'm sorry. 7th grade do sort of a trip right at the end of the year, and they also do sort of work right around the school in terms of ropes course. And to be honest, the reason they don't is because our work has been fundraised. We've tried to stagger when the impact is. So, you know, the 5th grade does go to Boston, but they also fundraise as 5th graders to cover that cost and their 6th grade trip. And then 6th grade, as the same students or students of the same families, that happens then. Then there's sort of a lull. Similarly in 3rd and 4th. So we've had to sort of trim what those expensive experiences are to balance it out over sort of those multi-years. So in between there are other things that happen, but that are less expensive. And that's generally covered by the PTA.
I think that this is going to be a multi-year conversation, especially
At this rate.
well, especially given the mission and vision statements that have just been written. I mean, I would think if strategically the district is moving in the direction of, you know, demanding pretty much experiential learning to be integral to what we do, we're not going to be asking piecemeal funding from PTCs and whatever. We're going to be holistically looking at the whole budget and how to fund, how to get people to be building the vision. So whatever we decide for this budget, I hope we're going to talk about this more strategically next year.
I agree, Lindsay. I think that's absolutely the point. For the long term, I think short term, I mean, I don't know how popular this is going to be, but I feel really strongly of going the policy route. I feel really strongly that we should not be asking parents for more than, you know, a $50. I think that's a real. I mean, and I'm sitting here like not wanting to look at Emily, but I think about, you know, the kids that we know and the kids we see and the families and like struggling people that are struggling. And I think that school should be a place that people do not have to feel that level of struggle, and they should not feel that, you know, going on a field trip should be really fun and exciting, but it's not fun and exciting for a family if they have to pay $150. So I think that that's a good start. I'd like to keep that conversation going for how to continue to add money into the budget, but the policy, to set that policy, I think would be a really good start.
I think we just need to be careful that we don't have the opposite effect of what Lindsay's saying, and by putting that policy in place, we then put restrictions on our school, like, okay, well, we can't do Chewonki this year because if they can't kick in more than 50, we can't go. I mean, that's the hard part.
And now that I'm on policy committee, I'm aware that we never want to be too, like, it doesn't make sense. So it might not make sense to have a hard and fast number in there, but rather to say that we're cognizant as a board that we want to keep it equitable among families, and we strive to do that. I mean, and I do believe that our building principals already do that to the best of their abilities with scholarships and things like that, but I think it's a good idea to do both, to have something in policy. And I like Kate's proposal. I don't know if the number is $50 per student this year, or if we start with $22.50, or if we, I'm not sure what it is, but I agree also with Lindsay that we should revisit this every year during budget season. And I also just want to make sure that we're talking about all students, all grades, and not just the through middle school.
Okay.
I just have one more comment. Maybe in future discussions, we should not isolate field trips and talk about experiential learning funding. What about that for next year? Like because it seems strange to isolate field trips, because then I'm thinking about like, well, what if you do stuff in the school that's outside of the classroom that may involve a consultant? Like, why are we
Well, because we had a week to put this together.
Oh, no. I didn't like as a criticism, but I
don't hear that. No,
moving forward,
I agree. We did talk about, we have authors come in. We have, Emily, you talked about somebody that comes in for the Native American unit to speak. Those are all expenses, but it was just, it became unwieldy. But I agree with you.
But maybe like each school has an experiential learning budget, and the leadership in the school has the flexibility to kind of do what they need to do.
And that is what we're trying to get to, because this is under purchase professional. So, really once it goes in there, if a principal decided next year, you know what, instead of going to X, one of those trips, I don't know, there were some interesting ones on there, they might end up, the puffin trip, they may end up saying, hey, let's bring the puffins to us or something, right? And so, to me,
Dennis is cringing.
That money will be in their account for them to use as it is appropriate.
So for the purposes of this budget, I would be in favor of doing something for this year, like, $50 per student goes to a school principal, and they decide how to use that annually among all the grades. And it doesn't have to be that every grade goes somewhere. I mean, it could just be the 6th grade, could just be the 8th grade, whatever.
And the reason I kind of picked on Julie on that one is that at our lower levels, we do tend to do more things, I think, in the school than going out to like a Chewonki because of the age of the students.
Right. Who wants to take 5-year-olds anyway?
What I will recommend, I still have other updates. Maybe I could have Michelle, would you do the numbers on what that would increase the budget if we went up to?
Did.
Okay.
So I sent you a text. That's why I was just so you know.
Right. The phone's in the bag. So
if we do, if we do K to 8, $50 per student, it would add $49,900 to the budget.
So
that's K to 8.
K to 8. So that's in addition to the 15.5 that's already in there?
Yes.
How about
it would add another $49,900?
How about if the 50 is 3 to 8 and it's a smaller amount for K through 2, because it's tiered here and there's a reason why it's tiered.
It is tiered, but I kept hearing the 50, so that was what I did really quickly. We would have to determine what you want for K to 2.
So maybe increase it by the same percentage that we're increasing 15 to 50, the same percentage to increase.
Can you give me just a couple minutes and I'll get you that number?
Can I ask while she's calculating, why are we not including the high school? I don't understand it.
So I'm going to, Jen, are you here? Mm-hmm. So they typically, when we were having this discussion, so I just talked about how we do a lot of enrichment at the school, and as a team we determined not to include those costs. We have like the authors and different things. And as a grade level, you don't normally take field trips, is that correct?
Not as well. There are some field trips that we take as a whole grade level. For example, on the day of the SAT, all of our sophomores are going to a to various colleges, to college campuses that get to pick between 4 trips, but those are all free. And then we take all the juniors to a college fair in May, and that's also free. Our most common field trips are the art department, and all of the main art museums are free to students. And then our other field trips are either sponsored by clubs that have fundraised or our other free opportunities. Our guest speakers are often free. Those are things that Dee Dee Bennell helps to line up, or I've lined up, or Charlie Millen has lined up. So really there is not a program that we have, as I've mentioned, other than Challenge Day, where we have had to have a cost for every student in a grade level.
I was prepared to speak to this later, but I think we need to reconsider whether it's Challenge Day or something like Challenge Day. I think it's very important and very mission aligned that we keep something in the high school specifically. I think it's the wrong time to stop that, even though I agree we need to rethink some things about some of the feedback that we've received around that. But that's one of the reasons why I would support this proposal and put some money back in the high school so that we can pay for a Challenge Day or something like it.
So one of the things that I did this week, just to clarify the number, so it was $3,300 for Challenge Day, which does not cover any of the travel costs. That is just for the 2 facilitators to come and lead the day. Everything else that we provide is up to us. They are no longer agreeing to support the whole class, so it would split it in half. So part of the essence of the day, which was bringing the entire grade level together, is innately gone because you'd have to split the class in half, and that would turn it into $6,600, and it would need to be 2 days. So it would also impact instruction because half of the freshmen would be there and half of them would be in class. And so the structure of classes would be challenging because it also takes over 30 facilitators to do that. So this week, one of the things that I did was connected with the leader of our program that's called RSVP, which is Reducing Sexism and Violence Program. And they just took over 30 students to a 2-day training to recognize things like risky relationship behavior, potential violence, how to be an active bystander. But they also did some work with empathy and connecting to others. They're leading a full faculty, the student leaders are leading a full faculty meeting on April 3rd. And so I spoke to him about would those kids who attended the training be willing to run next year some grade level groups or advisory groups or present to them so that they would use their training. So that's something they have not discussed, but he said that he would be willing to bring that to the students. So we have invested in pulling the kids out for 2 full days of school to attend this training. So to see them put that into use, and it could be something that I addressed last week, is we're having a really difficult time of carrying Challenge Day beyond 1 day. And so this could be a potential to expand that, because using our own students would be something that we could follow up throughout the year.
So do I hear that your concern with Challenge Day isn't just the $3,300 of additional cost, it's the splitting into 2 days, the impact on education, because now they're out for 2 days versus 1?
It's all of those things. I think $6,600 is a lot of money for 2 facilitators and nothing, and that's it. That's all that the cost covers. I think that there's a lot you could do with $6,600. There's other programs we could look into that would be accommodating for 100. We're going to get up to close to 170 students coming soon. So I think that there's other programs we might be able to look into too. But those impacts are definitely part of the decision. They were holding us this year, 10 days before the event. They were telling us that they might cancel, and we were trying to figure out, could we possibly do the 2 days? And it was, there would have been significant impacts in a way that pulling everyone for 1 day it was very different.
How was it funded last year? The 33?
Through our budget.
But doesn't it say currently there was nothing in the budget for field trips for you guys? Is it because it's not called a field trip?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not that we didn't fund it.
Right.
It's that we didn't call it a field trip.
Right.
To your point. Okay.
Is that for
Mike?
I'm sorry, just to clarify, is that Challenge Day for freshman class only?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's with the 170 number that you just said?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
For the students that participate.
So that's $38, $39 per student, just FYI. I mean, as we're trying to talk about per student costs.
So I just want to make a general comment. I mean, when you mentioned that Challenge Day would require you to break down the class into groups, then that basically send a message to me that, well, maybe we should look at another program, because I think having the whole class together is essential. I, however, have concerns about not replacing it with something that is as effective, and it could be in any myriad of ways, like you say, but I really don't want to see that go away and not be replaced with something else, especially in light of the fact that at the meeting this morning for the strategic planning, the student representative brought this up as one of the things that really helps students, and that sometimes students don't speak up to how much emotional support they need, so that need may not be recognized by adults necessarily. And they said that Challenge Day provided the space and even though it's not private, the privacy to actually open up and share things that they otherwise wouldn't, and that the school is not currently equipped to receive and react to. So there's definitely a need there, and Challenge Day was part of the puzzle to address that. If we take Challenge Day away and there's nothing replacing it, that will only exacerbate a problem that apparently exists and that we're not fully paying attention to.
So I agree it's ideal to have the freshman class go through it all together. Having been involved in it for the last 4 years since it started, I'm very passionate about this program because there's no other time that I can see that a student has the opportunity to see that their classmates are going through some incredible things: poverty, addiction in the family, death of family members, people that they might recognize as the student jock or the popular kid are going through real life stuff. And not only that, but adults and teachers they're side by side with, and they see that they've navigated really difficult stuff. And I think it's incredibly mission aligned. Our new mission statement talks about empathy being very important. We talk about creating a safe space in our school. And I think Challenge Day did that. That said, although I don't think it's cost prohibitive, when we're looking at some of the costs of the other programs, I think it's right in line. Challenge Day might not be the right thing, and I fully understand that. And I do know we haven't done the best job that we could making sure that students come back to it every year or throughout the year. The LL Bean grant, which is incredible, and thank you for the work procuring that, could be a way to revisit some of those ideas that are introduced in something like Challenge Day. My big concern is that we say we're going to look into something else and we miss a year, because we've been doing this for 4 years, and although not all of our students have participated, some have opted out, at least some of the language is now part of the school culture. And it breaks my heart to think that next year's freshman class will miss out on that kind of a similar opportunity. So I strongly advocate for some funding in the budget ongoing that also covers our high school students, so that we can have this kind of training. And I want to be really clear that this is not team building. While this is great for team building, and it's great for easing transitions into the high school from other schools as our kids merge in one big pool finally, it's far beyond that. This has a deep impact. I have a background as a corporate trainer and an executive coach, and I can tell you companies pay big money to try to get this kind of empathic learning in their populations so that they avoid things like sexual harassment suits and things like that. So it's important. It's so important that we invest this in our kids while we have them. And I think I said everything that I meant to say about that. But honestly, I would say that I would not be on the school board if I hadn't been a participant in Challenge Day, because it was that experience that made me see how much, how important it is for us as adults in this community to stand by our kids and fight for this kind of thing for them.
Thank you, Maddie. So just to clarify, it's not that we don't have any field work budgeted for the high school. It's just we didn't include it here because it was either less than $50 or we categorized it as something else. 'Cause
Correct.
It's not outside of the school.
That is correct.
Well, that means that even though Challenge Day will not be offered next year, the 3,300 are still in the high school's budget for something else?
Yes.
Okay.
Just to clarify, my request from last week was not which field trips exceed $50 per student. It was which ones exceed $50 for each parent contribution. So I just was doing what I could with the numbers here and backing out $50, assuming that that's what parents would contribute to the field work listed here. And amazingly, it comes out to parents contribute $25,000, RSU contributes $25,000, and fundraising contributes $25,000.
What?
How perfect is that?
How is that?
So,
How did you calculate all that?
yeah, how
I
did,
took the total cost, divided it by the cost per student, got the number of
Wait,
students.
slow.
okay.
It's the numbers that Becky didn't want me to see.
What?
Right?
I don't know if it was anything quite as
No, it wasn't
cryptic
that.
as that.
It
No.
was not that. It was just that the way you're saying it is an average. And, you know, for every, this is what made it so difficult, is because for every trip, it's different.
It's not an average of the ones listed here. It just happens to work out that way. What I did was I took the cost per student for each trip and backed out $50, assuming parents would pay $50.
What were the three categories you had? You had parents, you had budget, and
Fundraising.
Fundraising.
Oh, so you,
So on any given field trip, it doesn't necessarily work out that way, is all I'm saying. So we have some field trips that are taking place across the district where the RSU is not contributing anything, and that it's all being charged to the parents. We have other field trips where the parents are not writing a check because, you know, it's being funded totally through the budget. So that's what became complicated. And that's why I'm saying maybe on average it turns out that way, but on any of these field trips, you would have to have each administrator kind of get up and talk to it and then figure out the percent.
Right. I don't think it's going to be that far off from these numbers, though, because like when we're budgeting, we don't care how the money gets distributed. We're looking for the big dollar amount, and then you guys figure out how to distribute it.
So I didn't hear that. What I heard from you is how can we prevent parents from having to write a check larger than $50? And so to me, if you're allowing the principals to distribute it however they want, then what is happening is what is currently happening. You're writing a check this year at the middle school for $150 because the funds that he may have right now in the budget, he's using in a different way. And I thought the problem you were trying to solve was that no parent would be charged more than $50.
Yes, that is the problem that I'm trying to solve.
So you can see, I feel like I'm not kind of speaking clear. It is complex.
So you're saying even with more money at the middle school, we would still probably charge more than $150?
You're saying you need the policy. So you
I'm
need
saying
two
that you
things.
need a policy or a clear message. If you don't want to make the, you know, you need a signal from the board to say we really, unless it's an extenuating circumstance, we do not want a family to be charged more than whatever, because every year the field trips change. This is a snapshot in time that the administrators gave their best shot to of this is what's currently happening right now It's not what was happening 2 years ago, and it's not what we predict will be happening 2 years from now. And so, yes, so you could increase that amount, and depending on what trips there are, it could still result in a family being charged more than $50.
But I'm just looking for a projection for this year's budget, for what's next year.
So this was my, with the week to do it, this was their best snapshot of what's currently happening. And I'm not sure whether all the principals have even thought about, a lot of times those experiences come up quickly and they're like, let's try this next year.
Right, and it also varies school to school, right?
Yeah.
So like if you figured the Durham ones at the 150 a kid, and you split that a third, well, right now it's 100% fundraised, right? So if you said, well, now we want them to pay $50, even though they could have, historically they didn't use any budget money, they didn't use any parent money, it was all fundraised. It sort of throws up to her point where on average it works that way, but it really depends school to school how it's historically been done.
I'm just trying to get to the dollar amount that is there available for them to use. They can use it however they want, but, so if they, historically, for the Durham UMaine 4-H trip, they don't charge parents, then they don't need to charge parents for
They
it.
fundraise less,
Yeah.
right, to get to the total.
Yeah,
Or they keep fundraising and use it for something else.
exactly.
So, then can I ask, is what you're asking for that we just do something like $50 per student and budget for it? Isn't that achieve that goal? Why doesn't that achieve
I don't even
that
know if you need to do that much, though. I think to her point of the math, if you added
whatever
one
it
or
is,
10.
25 grand.
Right. And we were already at 15, right? So it's an
So it's
additional $10,000.
$9,500 is what we're talking about.
So let me be clear, I'm happy to have you put in more money for field experiences. And, I know the administrators would all be thrilled with that.
They don't look thrilled. They're like, great.
So how do you get 95? Sorry.
So
95, what?
$9,500 if you
Is what?
would be how much additional if you split everything a third fundraising, parents and the budget. So 25,000 divided by 3 is 25, and we already have 15 in there. So he's looking for another $9,500 to pay for the third. That would be the budget.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And I would like to hear what Michelle came up with. Thank you.
No problem. So for the K-2 level, I came up with $17.76. The 3-8, $50, for a total of $51,666 minus the $15,500 we have in the
I was
budget
like, wait,
already.
how did it go up?
Minus the $15,500 we have in the budget already would add $36,166.
36 and what?
166.
Thank you.
No problem.
17 was how much?
1776 for K-2.
And $50 for
$50 for 3-8.
And brought to a total of
51,666.
666. Okay. Which strangely aligns with the Tier 3 priority.
Pretty darn close.
$42,000. Okay. Maddie.
I found it. So that still excludes FHS, and I know we just clarified that there's $3,300 somewhere in the budget for something, but why would we not include high school students in this?
So I want to be clear, there's more than $3,300 in purchase professional. It's just we're not labeling it as field work or field trips. So we've got authors that come in, so there's a lot of other things that are in there that are in the budget.
They just don't do full class field trips.
Correct.
If you want to expand it to the high school, that was just our best thinking when we were looking at, field experiences.
Yeah.
I would advocate for us just talking about experiential learning and not distinguishing field for the purposes of this discussion now, and I would advocate for adding the high school. And so I would like for us to try to come up with a number that includes the high school.
So can I ask if, before you do that, if the K-8 also has numbers similar to what the high school has allocated to them for purchase professional that we haven't captured in this 15.5? Just to make it apples to apples.
So you want to take out what we've...
I'm just wondering if at the high school we call it something else because they don't do full grade, so we call it purchase professional, as opposed to you were able to pull out 15.5 very clearly for field trips, right, for the K-8 schools.
Right.
Do they also, in addition to that 15.5, have other funds that they use for these experiential learning
They
type
do,
things?
yes.
So you'd want to make sure you picked up that as well.
Can you do that real quick?
I'm going to guess
no. That would be a big no. Because each purchase professional
I
has
would
a
agree
lot.
because I don't even think all schools have that in there. Would have to go back into their individual budgets to see what was requested in that area.
Correct.
If we're talking about equity, shouldn't we be managing the finances in a similar way in each of the buildings?
Well, I think we're working towards that, and this is a step in that direction for this specific line item. I'm not sure it's a feasible undertaking to do it for every area, for everything that we're doing in every school, all at once. I don't know.
So there are many variables. The PTCs are much more active, K to 8, than they are 9 to 12. And so, when somebody is wanting an author or something like that, many times the PTC will, give money for that sort of thing. So we don't have, the budgets are built on need and not. And yes, we want to look at equity in certain areas. We want to have similar support, but the high school, as you just heard, is, kind of different than the K-8.
But let's be clear, there's plenty of fundraising at the high school. It's just that the students start doing it, and it's all geared toward paying for their senior trip.
Right, I would agree. And, and a lot of it's club-related.
The policy that was mentioned before with 4 letters that I can't remember right now.
IJOA.
IJOA. Is that policy language specific to field trips?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, it's called field trips and other student travel.
Oh, so there goes our theory to just quickly adjust the policy. Because in my mind, I was like, all right, let's just get a little bit more simple here. We've got a third priority budget item of $32,000. Sounds kind of similar to what we're trying to achieve, but without creating some kind of policy, then it's just like throwing money into the wind. I mean, it's like, it doesn't necessarily... Well, I mean, it doesn't create the equity that we're talking about. It doesn't create a fair system. It doesn't change all the accounting. I mean, this is multi-year work, as we, felt in the beginning of this conversation. So how do we, if we were to say, advocate for, increasing the budget by $32,000, third tier item, how do we then assert that money goes toward limiting the parent cost of experiential learning throughout the district to $50?
Right. So I think it does reflect the equity question. You said it doesn't address that. I think it does. The thing it doesn't address is the question about, can we cap what parents are having to pay for? And while we're talking about experiential learning in total, I'm not sure we've ever asked for parents to pay for an event that's happening in the school. So as it relates to asking for money, maybe the field trip policy still does work.
Okay.
Right, so we can budget it one way, but govern it via something else.
Yeah, I agree that adding money to the budget and saying, okay, this is so that you'll have X amount of money per student in each grade span is very much in line with the equity that we're trying to achieve. But there's also a timing issue. Changing the policy is going to be a much faster process than basically funding this field trip experience for all the students in an equitable way. If we don't fund this now for this year, then we'll have a policy change, and to be able to basically support that policy change, we'll have to wait until the next funding cycle, which means that the money won't be there until July, not of this year, but the following year. So it'll be another year and a half before we can support any changes in policy. So I would rather put the money in now and then start working on the policy change, because the policy change will not take a year and a half.
We hope. Mara.
Can I get clarification on the high school? Did you want to put $50 for the high school as well?
I mean, I don't know if that's excessive, right? Like, if we only have one full class event at the 9th grade level, does it make sense to include all 4 grades, or an event? I don't know. Particularly if we do have the grant funding from LL Bean to cover all 4 grades in the high school for some sort of, I don't know, program.
I would like to see us have some budget for the kind of training that we're talking about. And while I think the LL Bean, like I said before, while I think that's fantastic, I think it's a piece of a larger mission. I would like to see them have some budget, so whether it's a challenge day or something different, and then you build in other pieces that exist throughout the life of a student's time there.
So if we have 3,300 in the budget already for this transition experience, and we have 170 students, how much is it per student? Because if we want to bring it up to 50, already we have 3,300 there, so it won't be as much.
It's roughly $20.
Right.
I just wanted to bring up that, well, we have other grades in other schools that aren't doing field trips, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
So it seems kind of inconsistent to be like, just drop off. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like a consistent way to do it, to give the principal the money to disperse however is needed within the school. Oh, my mic is on, but it's not pointed at me. I don't know, it seems inconsistent to just drop off
At the high school.
at the high school when you have other schools that have your grades that aren't going on trips too.
So if you want to look at the high school as being a place to use money, I mean, I don't know if it's like a steadfast, Jen, rule, but like there are dues every year for 4 years in high school, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, $50 a year. Most people just pay $200 about senior week. So that could be a place.
Wait, they pay for the last 4 years all at senior week?
Yep, pretty much. So, and I don't think it's required, right? I don't think it's required, but it's like, it is required. Okay.
So no diploma? That's why everybody does it during senior week?
Could you come to the mic?
Yeah. So that goes towards the senior stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it's...
So the dues cover a variety of things. Some of it covers, say, the cap and gown is $17. So of the $200, $17 of it goes to the cap and gown. It also covers things like the boat and dinner, which are not required, and project graduation. A portion of it goes to that. So it's complicated to parse out which of that $200 goes to which thing. Students with financial need definitely get support. So we would not say that a student can't graduate without dues, but the dues, the class dues, are what support those events. Each parent group is looking at funding those in different ways and figuring out can some of the costs be lowered for that though as well.
So I want to just draw a distinction between senior week and some of the other experiences that we're trying to fund. I see the value and say a challenge day as a higher value. I know that if you are a senior and graduating, then senior week means the world to you, but as part of your education, I think some of these other experiences that I'm personally focusing on they're on a different level in terms of my priorities of what are the things that I would want to fund. So the 9th grade, I think it's very important because you do have that transition, and I think we absolutely need something there just to help the kids ease into the 9th grade and into the high school and have a way of just having a common experience right in the beginning. I don't know if I would necessarily say we need to fund at the same level this senior week.
I was just making the comment that it's a 50 per year expectation to go along with what Kate said of a $50 a year. $50 That's all. I wasn't saying that we should like cancel out all field trips and just do senior week. I was just bringing that up as something that's an expectation of parents when their kids are in high school.
So to clarify, we have, like what the board is talking about, funding this portion that would be over $50 for parents. And we said that would be like the 36,000 minus the 15 that we're already funding, right? Is that?
No, I think that we've got two sort of parallel tracks that both tie to $50 in some way, right? We've got the let's fund $50 a kid across the board, regardless of what we're charging parents, right? $50 a kid, this is what each principal has to spend for how they feel fit across their grade levels, right? That's one piece. And then there's another piece, which is the policy question, which is, do we want to limit how much parents are paying? $50. So the $36,000 that we had talked about, that's the $50 a kid funding.
Okay.
K through 8.
So,
Well, 3 through 8,
Oh, sorry.
1776, which I kind of like that number for the K2 kids.
so if we wanted to both create that equity that was in the tier 3 of the 32,000 and then prevent all the kids, parents from having to pay under 50 or over 50, that would be two things. So we'd be wanting to think about funding, because that's a priority that was on that list, right? So that's kind of not, that's a separate thing, right? So should we be considering both that equity amongst the schools, 32,000, and then we're talking about an additional amount on top of that? Or are we kind of thinking of them as two separate things?
I think they're similar, although it's an interesting question that, you know, we tied it to the number that they have on the priority list, but was that 32 meant for something different?
No, so the 32 was the amounts were different. The amounts were $10 per student for the K-2, and we actually did, it was $27 per student on, and I think we actually did put some in the high school at that point. That included the.
Okay, so that was just sort of boosting the overall funding for, it wasn't like, oh, we want to have a new program and it's this.
Correct.
It's we just want to increase the overall
And we were trying to do
funding.
the equity by doing it a per student.
Okay.
So that
Just not quite at the 1776 $50
And
level.
$50 level.
Okay.
Correct.
So that would boost the funding, but then not create, so for equity, but then not change the parent contribution amount.
That's really got to be a policy, is what we're hearing. So.
You would expect that it would, oops, sorry.
Yeah, I would say if you're adding 32,000, I would hope that it doesn't mean just $32,000 worth of new programming. The administrative team was talking about, you know, should we fund more of these field experiences to reduce the cost to the parents and to reduce the fundraising?
Thanks.
Right, and it probably depends school to school how they've historically done it on how they would use those. Kate.
I'm just going to go back to my original request, which was to limit any parent contribution to $50 and what the budget number would be for that. I think depending on how much you assume for fundraising, whether it's 50%, which was the first number I came up with, or 30%, you know, it's going to be $10,000 to $20,000. And I feel like that's a different issue than the $32,000 tier 3 funding request.
Well, no, I think they, I mean, if their funding request was to help offset parent, I think they're.
Right, but I'm separating out the portion that is to offset parents versus to add additional field work.
I would expect that it wouldn't be additional field work that gets funded. I mean, I would expect that with those 32,000 or whatever else we suggest we add to the budget, it gets full use for a reduction in the parent contribution. I mean, that would be my expectation.
But I mean, you have to keep in mind that how they do it is different school to school. So Durham, they're not paying anything, so there's no parent, contribution to reduce. So in theory, their funds would go to additional field work.
But the PTCs, I mean,
or
let's
less
not forget
fundraising,
who's
right?
funding the PTC
Fewer
efforts.
couch chip raffles. Well, they can't do that anymore. Apparently, it's against the law to bring a cow.
So I just, to me, if you're wanting to limit what is happening, that's a policy. I think to put something in the budget with these recommendations attached becomes difficult, right? Because, and mostly with the new strategic plan, the one thing that's coming out loud and clear is about more experiential kind of field work. And so, to me, I'm sure all the administrators are hearing you loud and clear, and they'll take that into account, but I think it's really important not to say we're not going to add a new field experience next year, because we don't know what opportunity that is going to bubble up.
Okay.
So if we go ahead and implement the policy, how are you going to have the funds to do that?
Well, I think that's the point of Valley's point earlier, is that, you know, if that's something we want to pursue, we want to make sure whether it's a additional of 9,500 based on your number, or whether it's their tier 3 request of 32, we want to make sure that we've included some additional funding so that they don't have to cut programs to meet the policy that we're going to put in place.
Or they have to fundraise more, or I think in the policy you could do some type of tiered year implementation, right? That we've done, I hate to even bring up the word proficiency-based diploma, but, you know, that policy was written in a way that, you know, in 2000, you know, whatever, 3 years out, we're going to get to the $50 mark. I mean, I could see that policy could write that in several different ways.
And I just wanted to clarify my comment about reducing the cost to the parent to the extent that parents are paying something.
Yes.
So I guess I'm was looking for this 1-year fix, and we're not going to do that, because why? I mean, we're going to continue to charge parents $150 for trips, because
I don't think that's what we're
10
saying,
to 20.
right? I mean, sending it back to policy, like, how does that not address it?
Like next policy meeting, right?
Right? Can't it get added to the...
Because we have to put the money in the budget to do it.
Right, so okay. I don't think I'm hearing that people aren't interested in doing that.
But we don't have it, we don't know the dollar amount.
Well, I think you put in at least enough based on, you know, Michelle's best estimate of what that is, whether it's 9,000 or 30,000. I mean, I think if we funded their tier 3 request, that would more than cover what you're looking at doing.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I'm saying. It's more than what I'm looking to do. And so I want the in-between number, which for some reason we aren't willing to come up with that number. There's an in-between number to meet that need. It's depending on what you assume for fundraising, it could be $20,000.
So it just I mean, if that is what, you know, you wanted to make a recommendation for a motion when we're talking about the budget to increase, then, you know, make that assumption, I guess, and base it on that. I mean, I don't know.
Okay, I'll just make up a number. I'm not really in favor of doing that, but okay.
But, well, I mean, the problem is that it's different trip to trip, right? So.
And fundraiser to fundraiser. I mean, that's what we struggled with.
I know that it's different, but we know what we've spent historically.
Spent as in from parents?
For this year, you mean?
Yeah.
So I'll ask Michelle if she can, like, I don't know, go online and look at that spreadsheet and see if you can make any sense of it, if you're understanding what Michelle's saying. Kate's saying.
You're asking what we've spent so far?
No, is there a way to take this list and say, okay, Wolf Neck costs $78 a kid. We asked for a check for $25 a kid. Fairy Beach, we asked for $20. Chewonki, we asked for $150. Add those up, figure out what the difference between that and $50, and that's the increase Kate's looking to add to the budget.
That was very clear.
I can
I mean,
see if I can do
But
that.
there's only take out the fact that Durham doesn't pay, and is that all of a sudden going to turn into we're not going to fundraise? So I think there's so many variables.
Right.
Is the
Yeah.
problem.
Right.
So many variables.
And the PTC doesn't raise the same amount each year and contribute the same amount each year. And
Right, but I mean, what we can use is this year's information,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, we could.
So,
Okay, how about if we move on and I do, while that gives her time to do that?
and I don't think
with
that needs
the
to be today. I mean, that could be next week, right?
Because you're adopting the
You're adopting the
budget.
budget next week.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And so I would recommend that I give Michelle a chance to see if she can do that.
So say that one more time. You have, take what we've charged
So-
the parent.
So just figure out from the sheet, right, these ones here, these are the big ones, right? These are only ones more than $50, and figure out what we charge parents for these events.
I don't have that in my budget.
Well,
But
no,
you have the people
no.
that
I
might
know
know.
it's not that you have the principals here.
Yeah.
And the spreadsheet that we created at the A team, they can use that and you can work on that.
Okay.
And then
Thank you.
whatever they've charged minus $50 times each kid.
But that's even more than what I'm asking. I'm only asking for the ones that we charge more than $50.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Right. So if it's
that sheet.
that's the sheet, what they charge minus the $50, that's the difference we would have to fund to get it down to $50, right? So if we don't charge them $50, minus 50 would be zero.
So is the exceed $50 per student is what our cost is? I want to know.
That's what
parent
she's
cost.
finding out. But I mean, we're definitely not charging. So like Durham, it's 150. We're charging parents zero.
Yeah, so I'm not interested in that.
Okay, so it's going to say zero. So that's what she's
Oh,
figuring
I
out.
thought you were saying to subtract the $50 out of that.
No, to figure out how much more we need to add would be to, so if we're charging 150, subtract 50, we need $100 per kid for that one to fund it, to get it down to your request.
And that's assuming that we're going to continue
Right.
fundraising that and that.
Yeah, there's a lot of
and-
assumptions in the number,
Right,
but
right,
it
right,
gets you a,
But is that what you're
The
wanting?
number that I already did, and that's,
no, because we don't know what we charged for these, right? You don't know what Mass Landing charged for Wolf Neck. We know it costs $78 a kid, but we don't know what each parent wrote a check for.
oh, okay. So you're not looking to just set it all at $50 per parent.
You just asked for what would we need to increase the funding to make sure that nobody pays more than $50 of more than what they're paying now, right? So nobody pays more than $50. So we need to figure out what they are paying.
No, that is not what I'm asking. I'm asking for the field trips that currently parents pay more than $50. Yeah.
But it wouldn't be anything other than what's on this list. And so, because it doesn't cost more than $50, I can't imagine we're charging more than it costs. So they're going to tell us, which of these are we charging more than $50? And what's that total, right? If we wanted to bring it back to $50. That's the increase you would like to add. Am I understanding correctly? Okay.
So you don't need to look at the 4-H one.
Yes. Correct.
So why are you saying you subtract something from that?
To find out how much we would need to add to the budget to fund it. So that if your goal is nobody pays more than $50, but we're charging them $150, we now need to fund $100. That's where the 50 comes out. You subtract the 50 to figure out what the difference we would need to fund is, I think. No. Yes. Right. We already have that number. It's these field trips. These are the trips that we would be discussing. So they're going to find out what they charge for these trips, and then figure out back into what.
And so, and so they're working on that number. But my concern about that number, it does not address the equity at all.
No,
So
I understand.
Okay.
I wasn't trying to do anything with the equity at this point. I'm just trying to, for this first 1 year, address this issue where we're charging parents more than $50.
At this point in time, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, that was a 15-minute discussion on the update.
I'm not done.
Any other?
Sorry about that. All right, so that's why I said. So we'll move on, and I'm going to ask Ray Grogan to come up. One of the updates is that I've worked with Ray and I have talked a couple of times over the past week, and he's also had a chance to talk to his leadership team, and at this point, we're recommending a 0.5 teacher reduction at Freeport Middle School, and he'll explain that, I hope, more clearly than I explained the field work. So my apologies for that.
No guarantees on that. Scheduling is always a complicated thing to.
Do you have a picture with a person falling off the side?
That's what I need. Without the picture, it's very difficult without the visual, just to kind of explain it through. So to kind of take backwards through the process of what, how I came to this was in starting to create the master schedule. And when I first sat down with Becky in December about our budget, we were not at master schedules at all at that point in time. But when we created the master schedule with the goal of getting math and language arts every day in the 8th grade, and then looking at the schedule and creating that, I met with the 8th grade team multiple times about the schedule, the priorities, and how we would make that work, and went through a couple different drafts of that schedule with the 8th grade team. And then came up with a schedule that would work. And then when we kind of started putting in teachers and numbers of teachers that are required, that's when we realized we have an extra half-time teacher because we also have Alex Brin, who is between Will and I's building, who doesn't really go into the formula for teachers, but is clearly taking 20 kids out of that class for a math class, and we have a literacy coach that teaches one class as well. So there are some other variables that get played into that. We will have a schedule for the 8th graders that have math and language arts every day. It keeps STEM, science, and social studies on the same 2 out of 3 day rotation that they have had this past year. Before that, everything was on a every other day schedule. We moved to a 2 out of 3 day schedule to kind of increase the minutes there. And now we're continuing to be able to increase the minutes in math and language arts to go to an everyday schedule. So to do that, and the other thing that allows that to happen is this one class, the enrollment has dropped. From when we sat here 2 years ago when they were 5th graders, we were projecting, I think, 139 to come in, and we are at 130 currently, with 2 scheduled to move in April out of state.
This is the incoming 8th grade class or the incoming 7th grade class?
Incoming 8th grade class. So this is the same class that we debated about a couple years ago. And we put the extra teacher at that point in time with the 6th grade class and not with the 8th grade class at that point in time. And that enrollment has dropped where the other 2 classes have increased. So everything within the building will be within the class size limits unless we get increased enrollment.
So that was my question. What would the class size be for those groups on your schedule?
Mostly, that 21, 22s.
He's running. He's like,
I am running.
No, one more question. Not quick enough.
So, other than the kids who moved away, how many are those, and how many may be moving away for other reasons? Or they're still residing in town, but they're going to other schools?
The 2 that are, like, in looking at, without, I don't have that right in front of me, but I think almost everyone, just the vast majority or all, have moved out of state or moved, further away, due to parents' work.
Thank you.
Okay, an update on pre-K since last week. Moore Street is now at 67, and I think Pownell is at 9 that are requesting to go to those schools. So that's just a few more, and I think we talked about last week that, we expect all those numbers to keep increasing. It's still early for pre-K students. And then Cynthia, maybe since Michelle's doing the calculation, you could hand out the yellow sheets?
I'd be happy to. So this is with the adjustment of the
0.5 reduction.
Yes, yeah.
And nothing else.
Right.
That's the only change.
Yeah. So what she's passing out is just the updated budget with the reduction of the 0.5 teacher. The only unknown that really remains still is the property and casualty insurance, which I think will be, you know, a minimal increase or a minimal reduction. And so
Because we assume 12%, right? This is the one we assume 12% on?
yes. And then this then will put off an expenditure increase of 3.35%. With that staff reduction, with the tax, an overall tax impact of 4.04. I just want to remind you that the administrative team in this budget prioritized maintaining the class sizes, which in order to do that, we need a 0.5 world language teacher, a 0.25 science teacher, the Durham 6th grade teacher, and a 1st grade teacher at Moore Street. Our second priority was increasing the nursing at Freeport Middle School, and that is an addition of a 0.3 nurse. And then we have increased student support by expanding the Endeavor program at the high school, giving the elementary schools an RTIB Ed Tech for student support. This supports Region 10 in expanding their programming and addressing building needs. You know, I think in particular the air quality. That was an increase of $34,000. And then it also addresses transportation needs. It has a new van in there, a new van driver, and a bus aide. And it implements the mentoring program, which is now required by statute. Our debt service went down $117,000. So that's just kind of a brief recap before you now start your deliberations.
Actually, I think before deliberations, we have public input on the budget, right?
Oh, yes.
I think we've driven them all away, but even Kevin bailed on us.
Yeah.
He loves the math. Do you have a question, Kate?
Oh, I just wanted to know how, under the drivers of the 3.35% increase,
Yes.
do you have a dollar amount, or maybe we don't do this, the impact for the increase to teacher wages? Is that carried in that?
Yeah.
It's in,
It's part of the 3.35.
it's part of the 3.35, but do we have the dollar amount?
I did not do a dollar amount
Okay.
for that, sorry.
But what is their percent raise this year?
It was
Is it
3.
I think it is.
No.
No.
More than that. It's more.
No,
the
I
second
think it
year?
was. I think the second year was 3, plus the step, which is like another 1.6, 1 point something.
So are you wanting the number? I think that would take her a while to calculate, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't have that right off the
Okay,
top.
that's fine.
Well, is it just the regular, could you go to the big budget and go to regular instruction teachers?
It's not just regular instruction. Guidance counselors are on
Oh, right,
Article
right.
1.
But the biggest one is regular instruction
Yes,
teachers.
the biggest one is there.
Okay.
I just have been asked that question, so that's why I wanted that information.
I think that'd be great. We can like update that and include that. That would be easy with just a little bit of time.
I just need a little time to do it, that's all. Yep. But I will caution that if you look from just wage to wage, remember we were in negotiations last year, so the way it looks like it's a double increase because
we had
it's
it in
2 years worth of
contingency.
increase, right?
Right.
Because we put it in, right. We put it in a separate line. We didn't put it in the wage line.
Kate, are you wanting a percent or just an overall dollar amount? I mean, with the request that you received?
The dollar amount.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Even the teachers' regular instruction is broken down by school and.
Yep.
So. Okay, so is there anyone who wants to public comment? I feel like everyone is an administrator now in the building, in the room. Okay. So that jumps us right to board deliberations, which we've clearly already started.
Do you want me to give you the calculation number, or do you want Candy to go first? Okay.
Is this field
So,
trip numbers?
This is the field trip numbers.
Okay.
So,
Hold on, I gotta find my paper.
yep, I'm going to go down through it if you don't mind. And I'm doing the calculation that Michelle had me do, just so you know. So, in talking with Emily, 0 was charged to the teachers, to the parents for Wolf Neck. 60 was charged for Ferry Beach. And for Chewonki this year, only 50 was charged, but remember next year it's probably going to be more like 127. So I use the 127 figure, just so that you know that. Under PES, 0 was paid for the Boston trip. 50 was towards the Chewonki.
But would they be under the same issue of 127 next year?
No.
Why?
Because you have money in there already. You have $1,100.
But Pownell's losing money too in the new, because they were the ones that had.
You had $1,500 and you now have $1,100. So would that change? I mean, I don't know how many students would end up.
They now have 960.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay, so would that change for next year?
No, I wouldn't go over.
Okay. Under FMS, Kiev, they charge 150. Acadia, 125. And then for DCS, 0 for both of them. So then if I just take out the $50 and give the difference, for MLS, we would add $7,921. For FMS, we would add $20,550. For a total of $28,471.
Tell me the Mass Landing number again. Total, 7,000?
7,921.
Okay.
$7,921.
Because that assumes $10 for Ferry Beach and then
$77
$77 for
Chewonki.
Okay.
Did you give the Pownell number?
No, because it would be $50, so we minus out 50 at 0.
Okay.
So PES wouldn't have anything and DCS wouldn't have anything.
Jen?
Again, not a popular comment, but I think this just furthers the inequity. Really furthers the inequity. And I would have a very difficult time agreeing to this because I feel like it furthers the inequity. And I think originally the discussion came from, do you want me to explain what I mean by furthering the inequity? Like, so again, Durham doesn't charge anything. And so then we're going to turn around and make it so other schools, yeah, they pay less and still 50, but then you're almost penalizing Durham for doing all the fundraising. And so I think we have to look at it like as a big picture thing to be equitable, how much each per student is getting, and then, like Becky said, kind of doing it the backwards way, creating a policy or kind of like a loose policy, and then the administrators fall in line behind the policy, rather than looking at people may have to change what they do. I mean, that's what would come from creating equity. I mean, there's no perfect way to do this, I don't think. But if the driving factor is equity, then administrators may have to look at doing things differently. Is really what I think would create that equity, I guess.
Right. I mean, and it could be that in, each school there's a different appetite for fundraising, right? There are people who would rather write a check than sell magazines.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to sell anything, except Girl Scout cookies. But, you know, and it's tough when you put a policy in place where you're like, okay, so now we can't charge more than 50, even though we would be willing to pay more than 50. You know, and we have sort of the circuit breaker system for people that can't, or are not, or don't want to spend that. You know, I don't know. It's, I think you're right. I think it's two different things to attack. You know, yeah.
I mean, I think that you're assuming that there's no fundraising going on for, it just happens that there's this $25,000 cost for Kiev. That there's fundraising going on. It's probably at the same level that Durham's fundraising for, actually I think it's more, for the 6th grade 4-H. I think the fundraising for Kiev is around $7,000.
Well, I mean, it's $75 a kid they're raising because they're charging $150, and the $225 is the cost. So, you know, if you assume it's all fundraised at this point, it's $75 a kid versus $150 fundraised for Durham's. So,
well,
yeah.
The fundraising for Kiev, I thought the number was like $7,000. Comes from, I mean, Ray can probably tell us.
I'm just figuring if it costs $225 a kid and we're charging the parents $150, the difference is $75.
Maybe he used part of his budget.
But I think she's saying that it should be, they've fundraised even more than $75 a kid. Then that math doesn't work. Valley?
I agree that we should abide by the principle of trying to be equitable to all schools and just follow some kind of formula alongside what you guys and the administrative team decided. I also believe that if we basically fund field trips or field work in general a little more generously, then that will go a long way in decreasing what the parents pay in the schools where they are asked to contribute a lot. So it will definitely help. And for the next meeting, when we'll actually be voting on this budget, I would like to know what the impact would be of having the $32,000 for fieldwork move up into the budget. And I'm going to switch to a completely different topic, but I also want to know what the impact would be of having the $62,000 for pre-K included in the budget.
But it's not 62. It's what they told us last week was 46.
It's a little less, yeah,
Right.
46, right?
So
Yeah.
I think that Michelle can probably get that as you guys deliberate.
Okay. So those are the two things that I would like to see. Thanks.
Lindsay?
Did we hear in the presentations from administrators how they came up with the $32,000 in the third priority field trip funding request that did not get included in the initial budgets?
Yeah, so that's what Michelle had just said was how the 15.5 already in there is allocated is the $533 and the $15 a kid. This money would be some form of $10 for K2 and then 27 for 3-8.
We looked at first, I think we tried to add up how much does all our field experiences cost, and I think we came up with over $100,000. I'm looking
The
out
sheet
there.
is 99 if you add up everything on the white sheet you handed out.
And yes, and so we just thought, as we were deliberating, why don't we try to increase a little bit every year? And so we kind of came up with that amount.
And was the impetus for the discussion around the field trips initially parents are paying too much? Like, what brought the administrators to talk about field trips in this world of all these things that they think about? Like, why did it come up to bubble up to this level for them? I'm just
I could make something up, but I'm not going to. I'll see if the administrators remember. I do remember us talking about how, you know, for some families, it's a hardship when you're asking something like $150.
Oh, yeah.
I do remember
I
that.
think
What do
it's
you remember,
absolutely
Ray?
everything that you guys have talked about. It's
Yeah. Okay.
reducing the fundraisers, it's reducing the parent contribution to make everything more affordable. The equitable piece came in, you know, also. So I think it's everything that you guys have truly talked about, with the addition to what Lindsay is saying about wanting to increase our opportunities for, you know, field work. And I think field work is the word that we've kind of used, not field trip. And that comes from Will with that, but that's the word that we would describe it as.
Because it's not fun, it's work.
You got it.
Okay. Yes.
I just wanted to correct you earlier when you said that the math doesn't work. If you take the number of students attending Kiev and multiply it by $75 per student, it comes out to around $8,000.
Okay. I just said that I just took the difference at $75 a kid, and you said I thought it would be more than that because it was $7,000. So I don't know how many kids went. So I just said if we charged $150 and...
Well, I know, but you were arguing against my point, which is that there's...
Your point was that they raised more than Durham had fundraised, and they didn't.
Yes, they did.
On a per kid?
No, I didn't say on a per
well,
kid
it doesn't,
basis.
no. Okay.
I mean, if you have 111 kids going to Kiev, you're raising around $8,000
Yeah.
for that trip.
Correct.
And you're doing it through one big fundraiser, which there are members on this board that I know have issues with that particular fundraiser.
Yeah.
So what I'm nervous about is if that fundraiser goes away, that trip goes away. And I'm trying to help with, through the budget, ease the issue here with funding those.
Buffer it with the
Yes.
funding. Okay. So our goal this evening, oh, Michelle's back. She must have more numbers.
I do. So for the 32,000, I only did the tax impact. I didn't do the budget impact. I hope that's okay. I can do both if you need it, but I just did the tax impact of what that increase would be, because that seems to be more important.
I'm more interested in the expenditure increase, but
oh, okay.
Sorry.
Well, I'll come back then.
Yes.
I don't want to throw a bucket of water on all of this because I definitely support these things, but I think it's also important for us to know a couple things. Number one, we're already in the headlines of the forecaster at, RSU 5 asking for 1.15 million. We need to be really careful about the messages, and we've gotten some very positive things from community members as the budget, the percentage increase has gone down and we're headed back up again. We need to be really careful about that stuff, and that's just on the whole thing, not anything in particular, but that needs to be out there for us to think about.
Yeah, always. If anything else you want to share while Michelle's running her numbers.
Nope, but I got it right now.
Perfect.
Okay, so for expenditure increase for the 32,000 is a 0.1%. And for the 46,000 for the pre-K, 0.14%.
And then, so that was expenditures, and then the tax was what?
The taxes for the 32,000 is 0.12, and for the 46 is 0.18.
Okay.
You're welcome.
So essentially that pre-K expenditure is offset by what we just dropped out of Ray's budget.
It's almost identical, yeah.
Because it's a half-time.
Yeah.
I think that might be money well spent. What's that?
I agree.
Yeah. Okay, so our goal this evening is to come to, so next week we adopt the budget, but really the deliberation is tonight. We give Michelle the numbers, she comes back, we adopt it. Is next week when we sign our 87 round the bend? No? Okay.
That'll be the first one in April.
Okay. All right.
So does that mean that we make motions tonight? There's no motion on the table and there's nothing to amend?
Yeah, we don't even have a motion in our, I don't think we're making that's why I thought we could talk about this next week.
Well, I think
We usually amend the motion on the table the day that we adopt the budget.
Right. Right. And
Otherwise,
particularly if
there's
we
no
don't have to sign
formal
it, so you
way.
don't have to have it with you, so you can adjust things. Right.
I think if you could come to some consensus or a majority vote, then we can get everything ready. It may
Wouldn't that be make it easy on you, Becky? When have we ever done that for you?
Yeah, I know you're missing two people, but, it's not an official vote, but, I mean, it would be nice to have some straw votes about, I think, what Valley has put two things on the table to increase to put the 32,000, field trip or field work funding back in there and the pre-K. I think if we just kind of know, then we have time to check all the numbers.
Okay. 7.5. So 3.57 would be the expenditure increase with both of those additions, if that was the pleasure of the board, including the pre-K and the increased field trip funding. And then, well, it would stay the same from last week's pink sheets of like 4.48 to 4.45 if we just added the pre-K. So last week's, when we were here, the expenditure increase was 448, and this week it went down to, 348. And so Ray's is already taken out of this 335 number. So it basically brings us back to that 345 number.
Or 357. Oh, you're just talking about with just that.
No, what?
Oh, okay.
357 with both,
Okay,
yes.
that's what I have.
Yep. Hold on. I wrote them down, but now I lost them. Oh, there it is. Okay. 1, 2, right.
4.3.
Yep. Okay. 4.34 would be the tax impact with both of those included. So keep in mind, this is the number, you included the number on the priority list, the 32, right?
Yes.
Okay. Not the 36 and change we figured out from the $50 and, okay.
Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Close enough.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so, so I guess I would be interested to hear if, generally people's agreement, disagreement, other things they'd like to talk about as it relates to the budget. Yeah.
I would be in agreement that we should include both, provided that 32 is distributed equitably, not only among the schools, but among all grade levels.
I guess I'm
Maybe not. I mean, I understand there's got to be some discretion, but given the amount of time we talked about, the kinds of training or programming that we're interested in, aligned with our mission statement, that we would not exclude the high school.
Yep. And I think Michelle said that 32 did include some funds for the high school, correct? Okay. Laura?
I would really be in favor, especially of the pre-K, of adding the pre-K, because I feel serving 48 students when we've got so many more families who've sought out, I think we should serve our community. And so I think that's really money well spent. I'm in favor of supporting the field work as well, but I also know that was the third priority, so I don't know if we also want to have some discussion on the administrator's second priority before.
Which was the driver.
Right.
No.
No.
She's talking about the one between pre-K.
No. So remember, you received a revised priority list as of February 26th.
Oh, so what was the order?
And the administrative team put pre-K above the driver.
No.
But the
she's
driver
saying,
is
the driver is
between
above
that.
the field work.
That's correct.
The driver's I have green.
I know I don't have it either.
Yeah.
And this is the driver who would be available, so we wouldn't have to cancel practices and games at the end of the day, sports,
Right.
that kind of thing.
And then to be used throughout the district for other needs when not driving. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, they prioritize this list.
I mean, I think it's really important. I agree with all the discussion about lowering the cost for parents. I would be interested to know if we add that 32,000, how much that would, the administrators think that would reduce it for parents, if they have any idea. Is it too difficult to say that?
I think that might be a tough calculation.
Well, I don't want a firm number,
Yeah.
but I don't.
Yeah.
So if we added the 32 to the fieldwork budget, would that follow, would it follow it in the same way that we did this, which it would be equitable? So it would just increase the number per school, and then administrators would have say on how that money is spent. Is that how the money would go?
I think that's how it was built, right? Was
Yes,
a certain
it
amount
was.
per kid based
It
on
was.
age group.
Right,
level.
and so, the only thing that made me nervous was when we talked about per grade level, because you can see just
Right,
from
so it'd
this
be per
list
school.
that it
Right,
may
yeah.
not be, right, it would be per school, and they would determine, you know, which events it went to kind of lower the cost.
I would just want to make sure that the money was being put where the administrators had intended it to go when they put that as a third priority. That being said, if something else is a second priority, I think that not to add to the, but like if the driver maintenance person is their second priority, like I don't know why the board would choose to put their third priority above their second priority.
Because we have our own priorities. It's cheaper. Maddie.
I think I know why, and this is Lindsay asked the question, why did this even come up in the first place? It's because we're about to review policy on fundraising, and there's a general declining appetite for fundraising, it seems.
Amongst parents.
On our board, for sure, and in our community. So would that...
So are you saying as a board, we put it above their second priority?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not comfortable with that. That's just what I'm not comfortable putting our priority in the budget above the administrator's second priority.
Part of that discussion, I mean, Ray just got up and talked about it because they've been heavily involved in that whole policy discussion.
I think Jen's
I don't know
point is
when
like
above the,
right.
It wasn't with the second priority in discussion.
Well, I would ask Becky about the timing. Like, when was the third priority list? When did this happen? Because those policy discussions are rather recent.
Every administrator, no, I'm just kidding.
You know, I think if the board has an appetite to like move that up, I think that's within your prerogative. I mean, I think it would be more bothersome if you took something like from the other priorities and you're bumping it up. I mean, we do struggle when we get into those different areas about, it might be 1 or 2 votes that separated them. When did we talk about it last? I don't know. A month ago? 2 months ago? Not that long ago, so maybe it was a month ago that we talked about that. I think they're very, very close, those 2 priorities. The bus driver, the custodian, would it be nice to have an additional driver that would help out? It would be. Would it be nice to have the additional funding for the field work, seeing where the strategic plan is going? That would be great too. I think the administrators came into it thinking we were getting everything probably through the second priority, and so I think that anything that you decide in that third priority would be greatly appreciated. And we're happy. I'm happy to have Dennis, who is, head of operations, talk to that A driver, custodial, or I think last time Craig did. I'm happy to have the administrators give you more information if you'd like.
Could they tell us how many, like, competitions students missed because there wasn't a driver? Like, if they had to guess, is that?
I'm going to look to Craig, and maybe Craig, you can just tell us in the past couple of months how many drivers. I think part of what you had discussed was that sometimes we just have to leave early or arrive a little later, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't have a number of how many games we miss. So what typically might happen is, there's a pecking order. So on any given day, if we don't have enough buses, the varsity teams go first because it's hill points, it's playoffs, those games have to be played. So what typically happens is a middle school game gets bumped. It either gets canceled, I shouldn't say canceled, it gets postponed, and we try to find a makeup date. The more that happens, the more it's harder to find a makeup date, because makeup dates are based on field availability, bus availability. We might both have an open date, but there's already 3 buses going out, so we can't schedule it for that date. So what typically happens at the end of a middle school season is they will play 1 to 2 games less than they should have because we just couldn't get them in. That on top of them leaving school early to go to MYA and hang out at MYA for an hour before the game starts, just so that bus can get back and do a regular route.
Can you remember the last time you postponed a game, just to give them an idea?
What happened this winter? I don't have a date off the top of my head, but
I can think of 2 middle school games for Durham that got postponed and eventually canceled because then there was like 3 weeks of rain, so there was definitely not enough time to reschedule all the games. For soccer, right.
Yep, it happens at Freeport Middle School as well.
Yeah.
I think the loss of instructional time, too, is a little concerning.
Oh, you should see how
More than
far
a
they
little,
go. Like, some of their games are so far away.
Yeah.
But
when it's not not
necessary.
Right, not necessary.
The other piece is the custodians being pulled, and then the buildings aren't being cleaned, and that adds to the learning environment.
I guess if we had to prioritize in terms of, the most benefit, where the field work really benefits, ideally, every kid, that probably has more, for roughly the same, actually less money, you can impact every kid. I don't know.
Is there any administrator that wants to comment on that? On the priority, the field trip, whether it's a field trip or a bus? I guess I just hate to vote on stuff when I feel like if anyone had anything to share.
I think it's a very tough spot. It's 2 super important things. I think I was maybe the most vocal around the bus, as Becky's smiling there, because it does impact the middle school levels more than the elementary or even the high school with that. So it's something that I felt strongly about, but also having gone through the policy committees and knowing with the fundraising and really feeling terrible about asking that $50. To me that is a good limit. It kills me when I have to ask $150, but I do believe in that Kiev program, and that's why I do that with that. So this is just my personal opinion. If a board made a decision one way or another, part of me is going to be happy, and part of me is going to be like, I want the other part. But there's definitely going to be a part of me that's happy that we're getting one of the 2. It really is. There's advantages both ways.
Do you want a quarter to flip for the visual?
If I made my choice, I know what I would choose, but that's up to you guys. What?
I think that's what she was.
No, I would do the field money. But I was very vocal on the bus on that. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone else want to take Ray down?
I think Ray was courageous to come forward because I think he was the one that advocated the most for the bus.
So I think that's helpful to know that the person who advocated most would be supportive of the field work too. All right. Anyone else want to share their thoughts on one or both of those items, or the budget as a whole? Anything? I mean, we don't have to limit ourselves to, additional things on this list. We could talk about the stuff that's already included. Are you guys actually talked out?
Well, I could just, if we need someone to say something, I could say something positive about this process. It's been wonderful. I really think the presentations by the administrators and the superintendent and the finance director have all been very clear, and everything makes sense to me, and I really appreciate how it was all laid out. Thank you very much.
I think the fact that we're not sort of ripping apart things at this point is probably a testament to the process this year. So that's good. I mean, if Becky's looking for us to try and nail down what we're not that anybody's obligated, right, to maintaining this opinion between now and next week, we're all free to change our minds. But do we feel like the general consensus is that the budget they put forward, that 3.35, with the addition of those two third priority items? 3.57 for the expenditures. Kate? No, okay. One or the other, or just in general?
It's more than I was wanting to put towards the field work at this point.
Okay.
Because I don't feel like we've laid the groundwork yet to do the next phase of the equity portion.
Okay. So just as a refresher, how this differs from what we originally got on the 23rd, you guys were pretty close with quite a few things still questionable. We were at 3.3, but the tax impact was 4.98 at that point because we didn't have the subsidy numbers. So with the additional subsidy that is proposed based on the current ED 279 we have, the tax impact of the current proposal on the floor is 4.04, and with the addition of the pre-K and that field work would be 4.34 overall. Yeah, Maddie.
If I'm remembering from last meeting, that property and casualty insurance from Region 10 we'll have that number by next week, but we also expect it to be tiny, is that?
We do expect it to be tiny, and it has nothing to do with Region 10. No, because, but what you're thinking,
we were originally waiting on
there
Region
were
10.
two things we were waiting for a couple of weeks ago, and last week we had the Region 10 with the 34,700, something like that. Yep. Okay. And this will be minimal, but of maybe a couple of thousand.
So it's not that it's a couple of $1,000 difference from the current year, it's just that we've already budgeted 12% increase based on the feedback we'd received. So we don't expect it to be materially more or less, unfortunately, than that. So, any other clarifying questions? Okay.
So we're going to build the budget around we're going to add those two things in? The one pre-K teacher and the field work. All right.
I have no idea where my agenda is, so.
I'm not sure I can find mine either.
There's one, got one. Yeah, so I think that's where we are, right? Yep. So,
Public input.
we already did that. Right, well, we had two public comments and a public input on this budget, on this agenda, and no public. We had them, we drove them away. Okay, so, but new business, before we get to the second public comment, we have a change that we feel like we need to vote on for strategic planning?
I think so, because you voted on the original.
Right.
Yeah. And so.
Look at you because I want you to do it.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I would love to have a motion. Lindsay has told us that because of work commitments, that she would like to step down from the Strategic Planning Committee. And Candy's been attending a lot of our meetings, and she would be delighted to replace Lindsay.
So Valley, a motion from Valley, second from Mara. Any questions? Thank you for all your work you've put in so far, Lindsay. And thank you, Candy, for stepping up to help fill those shoes. All those in favor? None opposed? Public comment? Motion to adjourn? Valley? Lindsay? All those in favor? Okay. Thank you.